Joining us tonight to take all of this up and more, Congressman Devin Nunes, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, author of Countdown to Socialism, available now. And it is, Congressman, great to have you with us. Let's start with these allegations about Haspel blocking access to declassified documents. And how successful can she be if indeed she is?
Well, we've worked closely together with the director for many, many years. I hope that that's not the case. I've read the same stories that you have. The key to all of this has been full and complete transparency and the maximum release of documentation. So no matter what intelligence agency has it, we need it, and we need it now. The American people have a right to know about this information that is still being classified. And so, look, we're continuing to work as well as we can. I will tell you that Director Ratcliffe has been a breath of fresh air. He was on our committee for a long time. He was also on the Judiciary Committee. And he has been in there doing his best job to try to make sure that the American people have a full picture of what was really going on back in 2016. And that's really the key here, Lou, that this has always been the key, because it never made any sense why the FBI would pick up a document like this Steele dossier that was just garbage and use it. That never made any sense. And so we need all of that documentation from 2016 to get out.
Well, we also have to look at what in the world the Inspector General, who's been lauded by Republicans and Democrats alike, oddly enough to me, investigating the investigators. The fact that Horowitz did not take umbrage with that process of the FBI, or as former Director James Comey yesterday told the Senate, everything was being done by the book, in his opinion, throughout. Yeah. This is mindlessness. You were amongst the very first to introduce what was really happening, this plot against the president. It is clearly that. It is orchestrated among the national left-wing media, the Democratic Party that has become an outrage in this country, and the intelligence community working hand in glove with the Democratic presidential nominee of 2016, Hillary Clinton, and her campaign and the Democratic National Committee. There is no guesswork here. It is obvious. Why in the world will the Justice Department not react?
Well, I believe that they are, and I will say this. It's quite possible that the IG, Horowitz, that you're referring to, did not see all of these documents, because, in fact, I am quite sure that documents that I have been able to review recently are documents that we didn't have during our investigation that were clearly relevant, that, quite frankly, every American needs to see the documents that I have seen. And that is, it's just wrong because, as everyone knows, we had a full-blown investigation that I was leading back in early 2017. We had subpoenas out for this information, and there was clearly an orchestrated effort to keep certain documents away from the legislative branch of government, both House and Senate. And that's unacceptable. And so, I don't know where, I know everybody wants to know where DOJ is at on this. Look, I don't know, and I should not know. And nobody should know where this DOJ investigation is at right now. But what we should have is that every document that's in the possession of the United States government should be put out, because you are exactly right, and this is the problem moving forward. The intelligence services in this country have been corrupted by the Democratic National Party and their propaganda arm in the media. And this is a problem that only third world countries have. And as the Republican leader of the Intelligence Committee in the House, I have a duty and a responsibility to ensure that never happens. My colleagues and the American people are counting on us to make sure that information gets out.
You're exactly right, and we should point out that everyone who's been elected by the American people to serve in Congress and the Senate have precisely the same duty, and in too many cases they are not fulfilling that duty. In fact, they're violating their oaths to defend this Constitution and the American way of life. It's outrageous. Let's turn to John Ratcliffe, who you just mentioned. Indeed, he has done the nation great service in declassifying and making known these documents, and most recently and most explosively, the documents that show that the intelligence agencies, at least some of them, believe that Hillary Clinton actually originated the idea of the Russian collusion allegations against Donald Trump and his campaign.
Yeah.
Where will that go, and why is it, in your judgment, that the FBI never followed through, despite that referral from the intelligence community?
So this is something that we actually did work on. We were mocked at the time by the propaganda arm of the left, the media, every establishment group in this town, because we said there was a tradecraft problem here. And one of the criminal referrals of the 14 that we've made is exactly on this issue. And so Director Ratcliffe now has put out this information that we knew about some of the information, but it's far worse than I ever imagined. And the American people need to support the Director of National Intelligence. He has a responsibility on the executive branch side to fully brief Congress and to fully get this information out to the American people.
The president is now in a race for re-election. It is we are told by many of the same polling organizations that were entirely wrong in 2016, that he is running behind in a number of battleground states and nationally as well. And apparently there has been a decision made at the Justice Department not to release the information that the American people need for there to be true transparency and about what will come, if anything, of the Durham investigation. This is not child's play, and I think, frankly, Congressman, that the Attorney General is playing the American people, perhaps the president. I'll put it straightforwardly to you.
Well,
I am very uncomfortable that this has taken so long.
Let me tell you what I think it is. So I do have confidence in Director Ratcliffe, and I do have confidence in the Attorney General, and I do have confidence in the U.S. Attorney out of Connecticut. But I think here's the issue. We've seen it time and time again. The media knows that Durham is sitting on, when I say the media, that basically means the Democratic Party, is sitting on something. It's the biggest scandal in American history by far. And so what they did is they ran a series of fake news bombs that they dropped on the U.S. Attorney out of Connecticut. And I can't say this because I've never spoke to the U.S. Attorney out of Connecticut, but I think it always gives pause because so many people pay attention to what the media is saying. And, you know, I would encourage everyone at the Department of Justice to ignore what the media is saying. And I can tell you clearly, this doesn't involve this election. So when you're talking about the dirty cops at DOJ and FBI, former Clinton folks, Clinton campaign people, that has nothing to do with these elections that are going on right now. So I would encourage them, if there's something that should get out before this election, it better happen. Because, look, if, you know, I don't know what's going to happen in the election. The president is facing tremendous headwinds. I still believe the American people are going to make the right decision, and he will be reelected. But if it comes out later that there was something that really would have changed the direction of this election, I mean, it'll look once again like the intelligence services were doing what, and the DOJ was doing what, backing up the Democratic Party, and it will, I think, lead to really bad things in this country. And the president, and I'll just make sure, I want to point this out, the president mentioned this the other night. The left continues to say, and the media says, are you going to accept the results of the election? And Donald Trump did a good job. He probably should have expanded on it more. It's Biden and Clinton and Obama and the media who never accepted the results of the election. They corrupted our justice system, and they just about took out a president of the United States. And that coup attempt continues to this day. It's ongoing as we speak.
And because of the national left-wing media operating as, instead of being the fourth estate, they are now the fifth column in this country, and they're working in perfect alignment with the radical Dems, what has become the party of hate, and the deep state. And to not mince words again, This president has been under attack from the Democratic Party, from the Democratic Congress, and the Democratic leadership for over 4 years. And the result has been exoneration, 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 and they even pressed with a phony impeachment inquiry. It is outrageous. By the way, they did succeed in stealing the election, the midterm election of 2018, which changed the balance of power in the U.S. Congress, as you well know.
Yeah, the hoax was used, and the Mueller witch hunt was used to raise money to fund their 2018 elections.
And to destroy a presidency.
That's right.
Congressman Devin Nunes, who has been defending this president and this country and our values throughout, we appreciate it. Good to have you here.